Good afternoon, everyone. I want to give a quick shout out to Paul Kitty, our events and marketing director. He always chooses the songs at the beginning, and we never know what it's going to be until we hear it. I think David Bowie change is very appropriate for a talk about reinvention here. So, to kick things off, my name is Luke Tannen. I'm the executive director of Chicago Innovation, and I'm thrilled to welcome all of you today to invent and reinvent yourself. We are now midway through our 20th year at Chicago Innovation, and I am joined by the person who co-founded our organization, Tom Kazmarski.
Thanks, Luke. Hey, it's great to have everyone here today with us. You know, this is such a personal topic today, and it's one that is so closely related to innovation. It's all about reinvention.
That is right, Tom. And I'm willing to bet that everyone tuned in today has experienced some level of personal and professional reinvention, whether it's been an adjustment to your lifestyle and mindset, or maybe a quick and or dramatic change at your company.
But you know, it's something that innovators have always been accustomed to. Innovators really solve problems better than anyone else. And today we have a group of master innovators. And the reason why they're master innovators is because they are master reinventors and they have recreated their own careers and selves several times. That'll be great to hear about today.
Yep. And before we hear from them, there's a couple things I want to share with our audience. So first, if you have a question for the speakers, please send it to us via the Zoom Q&A, and also keep an eye out for a polling question so we can get your opinion. And then now I would like to recognize our terrific year-round sponsors, starting with our diamond sponsors, SMS Assist, Wintrust, Accenture, and Walgreens. Our gold sponsors, Comcast Business and Exelon. Silver sponsor, Vetter Price. Bronze sponsors, Thomson Coburn, Groupon, Energy BBDO, LK, Ramsey Innovations, Crown Castle, and Aero Digital Labs. And then our wonderful media partners, WBBM News Radio, Intersection, Clear Channel Outdoor, and NBC Chicago.
And today, leading our great discussion with this great panel is our good friend, Pete Kadens. Pete is a serial entrepreneur and philanthropist and currently serves as the chairman of the Kadens Family Foundation, which is dedicated to closing the wealth and education gaps in the U.S. He retired in 2018 as co-founder and CEO of Green Thumb Industries, one of the largest publicly traded cannabis operators in the U.S. And previously, Pete had started one of the largest commercial solar companies in the U.S., SoCore Energy, for which he won a Chicago Innovation Award. Pete is a Chicago Innovation Board member, longtime friend, and master of reinvention. Please welcome Pete Kadens.
Awesome. Thank you, Tom, Luke, Paul, the whole gang. Super excited to be back here today and to be interviewing these great panelists. You know, my career took a couple interesting twists and turns. I went from investment banking to outsourcing to solar energy to cannabis. Not a very linear career, and now to philanthropy, not a very linear career path. But I think that along the way, the tools that I gained from reinventing myself, the willingness to be vulnerable, the understanding that being insatiably curious is an important driver in your ultimate success, and just the willingness to get out of your comfort zone, I think led to some of my eventual opportunities and some of my successes down the road. And so we're going to hear from people today who are willing to be vulnerable, who got out of their comfort zone. There are going to be some amazing stories we're going to hear today from our panelists. And so before I welcome our first two panelists, Paul, I would like to ask you to pick up our audience poll. We're going to ask our audience real quickly about some of the things that they feel relative to innovation and reinvention. And so our first audience poll is very quickly, and what area are you most focused on reinvention right now? It's a multiple choice answer. Is it your mindset, your relationships, your healthy lifestyle, your professional pivot, changes within your company, or something else? We'll give you 15, 20 seconds here to respond. We'll show the poll results and talk through that real quick, and then we'll get on to our panelists. So you have a minute here to respond to our poll. That'd be great. We'll show the results here in a couple seconds. All right, here we go. Thank you, Paul. So interestingly, most people are focused on their professional pivot. Almost 50% of the respondents were focused on the professional pivot. And I think a lot of us are always focused on our healthy lifestyle changes as well. But that's good to know that many of you are focused on taking a next step in your career, doing something different. And so now we're going to introduce two women who have both very recently undergone a professional pivot. And so many of you in the audience who responded that way to the survey, you're going to have a real exciting experience listening to these two women. The first is my friend and a great human being and leader in this community, Dory McWhorter. She's a lifelong social innovator, a CPA, an accountant by training. And then she went from accounting to being the CEO of the YWCA of Metropolitan Chicago. And then a couple months ago announced that she now very soon in the next month will become the CEO of the YMCA of Chicago. She also serves on numerous corporate boards and nonprofits boards. Please welcome Dory McWhorter. Thank you, Dory. And next, we're going to introduce Suzette McKinney, who is a principal and director of life sciences at Sterling Bay, who's doing amazing things here in the community in terms of development. She's charged with leading the national expansion of the life sciences real estate division for Sterling Bay across the United States. Before this, only a couple months ago, she was the CEO of the Illinois Medical District. So again, Suzette, please join us on screen here. And another individual who's going through a professional reinvention. So very timely for you both. So Dory and Suzette, I'm going to start out by asking you a question I'm going to ask everybody here, kind of a get to know you question, if you will. Can you share something you've experienced recently that moved or inspired you? This doesn't necessarily relate to reinvention, but we like to get inside the brains of our panelists and know that. Dory, we introduced you first. Why don't you tell us something recently that has inspired or moved you?
Sure. That's a bad question to ask someone like me because I literally look at the flowers. I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe they bloomed again. And so, but from an inspiration standpoint, I think what's really been inspiring to me is just to see as we continue to emerge what reemergence looks like for folks. And so I'm literally just watching people sort of reinterpret the world in their own way. And that's just so inspiring to me because I think that there is no playbook coming out of this pandemic, and to watch what people do in the world is really inspiring to me because it sort of gives us permission to sort of create our own path and figure it out. And so not necessarily related to reinvention, which I know wasn't the question, but that is very inspiring to me to watch people figure out the world now.
Awesome. Thank you, Dory. Suzette, what about you?
I would agree with what Dory said, but something specific that recently inspired me was watching the footage when the 14-year-old Zaila Avant-Garde from Louisiana winning the Scripps National Spelling Bee, because not only is she a 14-year-old and winner of this National Spelling Bee, but she holds 3 Guinness World Records. And for me, she just exemplifies someone who goes after their dreams and their goals with reckless abandon. And, as responsible as I am, that's something that I try to do in my own personal and professional life. I don't think I do it nearly as much as I imagine this young lady does, but it was just so inspiring for me to watch the just sheer joy that exuded from her body when it was announced that she won. And I thought, wow, what a great example, not only for young girls, but for women as well.
Awesome. Thank you. Both great examples from both of you. Thank you so much. Dory, we're going to start with you with a question. You started 8 years ago as a CPA running this nonprofit agency that had an $11 million operating budget. I know because I'm on your board of directors. And now today you're leaving and it has roughly a $30 million operating budget. So you basically tripled the size of the organization. You reinvented the organization along that way. So I guess it's a multi-part question. We're trying to get into the practical elements of reinvention here. How did that role change you? What and how did you coming into an organization that needed change? How did that prepare you to reinvent yourself? And then now you're going from the YWCA to the YMCA. What were the steps and the process you went through to determine that that was the right change for you? And how did you pull it off? Because it wasn't necessarily an easy change. And I know it was weighed on you heavily.
Sure. So, and there's so many questions in there, Pete. So I will try to be super concise with our short time together. And first of all, one minor point of clarification. So when I started, it was about 11 million, and with the budget we just got approved, we're almost 40 million. So I just want, so
Very
being
good.
an accountant, I want to make sure those numbers were clear.
Right.
But I think, you know, it's interesting as we talk about reinvention. I've been thinking about this a lot because I've been asked in so many different ways what it means to sort of transition from job to job that I think are clearly very different in sort of the purpose and the scope of those jobs. But one thing that's consistent is who I am. And so what I continue to figure out, and I know this true about both of y'all, because both of y'all have been on the board, and I know both of you are extremely amazing human beings. But what's important to me is that all of these opportunities are ways that I literally express myself in the world, right? So it's less about reinvention and more about continuing to align to different aspects of who I am. And so with the YWCA, it was really clear to me when I first joined the organization that absolutely, and I had joined the organization from the board, that I saw the opportunity to truly support the organization in being sort of a better business, if that makes any sense. I thought that they had the impact thing down pat. They understood the mission, but the approach that we were taking from a business model perspective at the time wasn't sustainable. And so that's what I focused on. And given that I had an accounting background and understood business and drivers, it was easy to some degree, right, to think about it from that perspective. And so as we've been able to go do the work of the YWCA, the real focus on it was twofold. Is one, really, who am I and how do I want to show up in this work? And knowing that I do bring a business approach to a lot of different things, that was how I sort of, or what I applied to the YWCA. So one, understanding sort of who I was and how I wanted to show up. And then two, really understanding the organization. We cannot underestimate culture and what that means to any organization at any one point in time. And so to recognize that the organization was in fact ready to continue to evolve, because I do think, you know, it's interesting. I often don't like a lot of rewords because presumes that there was a starting point that we're getting back to. And I don't think that that's the case. I think that we're constantly evolving. And so for me, it was what's the next evolution of this organization, given where we are and what we needed to do. So lastly, I'll say about the YMCA, for me, as I continue to learn about myself through the process that I did go through at the YWCA, what I know is that I have a profound love for humanity, and I wanted to continue to express that. And the YMCA is in a position where they reach a lot of lives, and I wanted to be a part of that as well. So for me, it wasn't necessarily leaving one to go to the other as much as it was about expansion and how I can continue to evolve and grow into that role as well. So I hope I got some of those questions in there, Pete, because there was a lot of them, but at least hopefully planted some seeds.
No, and I think knowing you the way I do, Dory, I'd say that you really have insatiable curiosity. You like to try new things. You're someone who experiments a lot. I think one of the things that was key to your success at the YWCA is you were willing to trial and error. You were willing to fail. And I think one of the key elements of invention or reinvention is being willing to fail. Because if you aren't willing to do that first.
Yeah. And I don't say failure, perhaps. I say unplanned learning opportunities. So, so I am very open to unplanned learning opportunities. So yes, thank you.
And I worked through some of those with you, and I enjoyed my experience of those unplanned learning opportunities. Is that transitioning to you and your significant career and life change over the last 5 or 6 months from Sterling, from the CEO of the Illinois Medical District to now a principal at Sterling Bay? I guess, can you walk us through that change? Your decision-making process, how you recognize this opportunity, how you knew it was the right move professionally for you?
Sure. And thanks for the question, Pete. You know, it's really interesting because I was so heavily engaged and involved in what I was doing at the medical district. And, you know, for any audience members who don't know, at the Illinois Medical District, one of the major initiatives that I was working on was building a life sciences innovation park in the medical district. And I was doing that in an effort to tackle the extreme healthcare disparities and life expectancy disparities that we were seeing on the west side of Chicago, indirectly through economics. And in my research, I had found one statistic that indicated 40% of life sciences jobs only require a high school diploma or GED. So I saw that has an opportunity to have impact on people's lives economically, which could down the road improve their healthcare and life expectancy outcomes. Well, I was doing it on the west side of Chicago, but when the opportunity to go to Sterling Bay arose to lead its life sciences practice and to expand that nationally, I saw that as an opportunity to have greater impact and do the exact same work all across the United States. And I just felt like, you know, for someone like me who desperately needs to have impact in my work as purpose, it's something that I see as personally enriching and professionally challenging. I just couldn't pass it up. So while I wasn't looking for a new opportunity, it just sort of, you know, came into my pathway, and I decided to take advantage of it.
Awesome. I love that. Suzette, I'm going to come right back to you with another
Sure.
question, you know, and then we'll ask Dory the same question. You know, there are specific skills and habits and attributes with people who have the capacity to make the big career and life changes that you just made. What are some of the things that you think are embedded in you or innate in you that you have that maybe other people don't possess or should be working towards developing possessing that enabled you to make such a big shift?
Well,
And what are the things you do on a day-to-day basis? What are the habits, the work regimen that you do that allows you to adapt so quickly and so easily to changing environmental conditions?
well, first I would say I have a number of mottos that I live by, but one of them that I think is appropriate for the question you just asked is, you know, stay ready so you don't have to get ready. I live by that. But I will also tell you that I have an insatiable curiosity and an insatiable sort of passion for learning and doing more, constantly challenging myself. So, you know, when the opportunity to go to Sterling Bay arose, the first thing that crept into my mind was, you know, I know a little bit about real estate, but it's not an area that I studied in school. You know, I'm a public health and healthcare person, but that insatiable appetite to continuously challenge myself, you know, just really gave me the courage to say, you know what, I'm a quick learner. You know, everything that I need to know, I already know, and that's why this opportunity has come my way. But I will learn more in the process. So I think that that's one attribute. Another attribute is, you know, again, just wanting to be impactful in the lives of others, because I truly believe that in leadership, it's not about you. It is about how much and how often you reach back to help those that are coming behind you, or perhaps those that might be less fortunate than you. So that's something that I saw as incredibly important as well. And I don't know, it's just, I think Dory and I sort of have this alike, kind of this, you know, hard charging, always pushing, let's see how I can grow and stretch myself. And so those are the characteristics that I possess that I think sort of just allows me to continue to take on more and more challenges just to see how far I can go.
Yeah, well, we're very fortunate that our first two panelists have such amazing impact orientation. Dory, you know, same question for you. What are the
And
things?
same answer.
All right.
What I thought was so funny, I was like, oh my God, she literally took the words out of my mouth, which were learning and curiosity. But I'll add one more in terms of the practices. But, you know, Suzette literally took the words out of my mouth. I think that we have to sort of stay like in learn mode, right? There's no way we can ever know everything. And as you know, the pace of change and just the inventions and innovation is constantly happening. And so if we're not staying in learn mode, we are missing opportunities consistently, right? So to stay in learn mode and then be curious enough to go follow through and actually learn something, right? And put yourself in places where you can learn. Like I think Pete, you know, you and I share so many things, but this as well is that we want to learn from other perspectives. We want other perspectives and other people around us. And I do think that particularly in such a polarized world that we live in on a number of issues, that the fact that we stay open to gaining new perspective and letting that curiosity drive us to get those perspectives, I think is super important. The one piece that I won't say that Suzette and I differ on, but I'll say it a little differently, is that, you know, I actually do think leadership is about you. because the consciousness of any organization that I've ever been in has been directly related to the consciousness of that leader. And by that, I mean, to the degree that that leader is willing to be expansive and grow and learn, that organization can be expansive and grow and learn. And to the degree that leaders aren't that way, the organizations aren't that way, right? And so I do believe that the pure possibility of the organization is directly tied to how that leader embraces those things that Suzette and I talked about: curiosity, learning, expansion, getting new perspectives, bringing perspectives around you to challenge the ones that you have just been embedded in your business and in your life, right? And so to me, it's, I say that there's literally two people in the world: those who are expansive thinkers and those who are limited thinkers. And to the degree that we can continue to expand and grow, that to me becomes the baseline to be able to reinvent and reimagine what's possible for yourself or anything that you touch.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Dory. And Dory, just coming right back at you, one more question for you all before we go to the audience for Q&A. Each of you have talked about your open-mindedness, your willingness to change, your adaptability. How did you, Dory, and ask the same question for Suzette? I mean, all of us had to prepare for change that we didn't see coming as the pandemic set upon us in March of 2020. And I think being willing to adapt and change and open-minded to change in an environment where you're required to do so is part of being a great leader and is part of reinventing yourself and your organization. So Dory, maybe if you could real quickly tell us, is the pandemic set in? I think it's just really good to have a tangible example here. How did you prepare for that dramatic change that you and no one else saw coming?
Yeah, that's so fascinating, because I don't know that you ever prepare, but to quote Suzette, you don't have to get ready when you stay ready. And I just think that I have accepted that change is a constant. And so in any moment when you're presented with a new set of circumstances or fact, you have to respond to those or address those. And sometimes you have a longer runway by which to see those, and sometimes you don't, like the pandemic brought us. But I think that if you're in a mindset that change is something that we should do, we need to do, that, whether we are ahead of the change or how behind it, whatever the case may be, I think the fact that if we're always staying open to recognizing that what you see today is possible that will not be tomorrow, that puts you in a different position to be able to act differently. But then also recognize that there really is possibility and opportunity in every single thing. And so to look at that, I would actually, as I continue to talk and think about other things, to be sort of possibility minded I think is something that's really important too, because when you are presented with a new set of facts, you can say, hey, what's possible in that set of facts? And then what can we do? What can we make happen? And I think staying or being aligned with that type of thinking also prepares you for whatever the next set of circumstances or changes that we will inevitably encounter.
Right. Okay, thank you. And a reminder to the audience too, if you have Q&A for these amazing women, now would be the time to type it into the chat or the Q&A. And Suzette, same question for you, which is, how do you prepare for change? I know you're always ready. You stand at the ready.
Always ready.
But how, going back to the tangible example of the pandemic, how did you prepare for that and adapt to that dramatic shift?
Well, first I'll say I agree with everything that Dory just said. And quite honestly, Pete, I think I had a little bit of an advantage going into the pandemic. What many people may not know is prior to going to the medical district, I was a deputy commissioner at the Chicago Department of Public Health. So I led all of our bioterrorism and disaster preparedness and response programs. I knew that a pandemic was coming at some point. I just didn't know which point. And so I credit the training that I have in disaster preparedness and response and the nearly 14 years that I spent at our city's health department with giving me not just the mindset, but that ability to be able to essentially pivot on a dime, because you never know when an emergency is going to happen. And so it's a part of that staying ready, but just having the mindset, and this is, goes back to what Dory was saying as well, having the mindset to be able to make that pivot, recognize that there is opportunity, deal with the situation at hand, but recognize that there's opportunity for growth, learning, or even something else positive coming out of a situation that even appears to just be the worst thing that could have possibly happened.
Right. Well, you were able to really leverage the diversity of your experiences and your background. There's that saying, that
Yes.
some people work 20 years, but all it really is 1 year repeated 20 times. You had a bunch of different experiences because of your curiosity that you leveraged, and it made you more prepared for the pandemic than most. So that's fantastic. All right, Paul, we are going to go to the audience Q&A at this juncture for Dory and Suzette.
Thanks, Pete. So this first question is from Molly, and she wants to know, have you observed anyone trying to make a reinvention that didn't work? And if so, why do you think it didn't work?
Dory, do you want to take that?
I don't know that it's interesting. I don't know that I've ever observed anyone going from a pivot or reinvention that didn't work as much as I see people do things that other people expect them to do, and that doesn't work. And so my observation has been that the closer aligned you are to, and I know this sounds so airy-fairy, but the closer you align to who you truly are, I sound like Glinda the Good Witch, believe in who you are, right? And follow your dreams type of thing. But I do believe that the more closely aligned you stay to who you truly are and what you want to do, the chances of that unlearned planning opportunity happens less, right? It's when we try to go after the dreams of others that others have for us that I actually think, or the scripts that others have for us, is where I see the downfalls occur, because people like to write stories and have you live into them. And I just suggest people write their own stories.
See, so well said. I don't know that I could have said it any better. So we'll leave it at that.
All right, this next question is from John Davies, and he wants to know, there seems to be a danger of innovation becoming an elitist activity. What are new ways of reaching the majority of Americans to involve everyone in innovation within their communities?
Well, one of the things that I think is, really important for all of us to remember, innovation, reinvention doesn't necessarily mean at some large grand scale. For me, it has always been imperative that I create innovation or reinvention in my own communities. So when I think about the work that I was doing at the medical district and now what I'm doing at Sterling Bay, it was really born out of, the narrative that we've heard so much here in our city about just poor outcomes across the board on the city's south side and the city's west side. And those are both communities that I come from. I was born and raised on the south side. I went to school and I've worked on the west side. So for me, it was about just making an impact in the very communities that I come from, which, just unexpectedly for me led to an opportunity to do the same nationally. So I think if we just all focus on where we are in our lives and what's going on around us in our own communities, and don't be so worried about, as Dory said, what other people are doing, what other people want you to do, what's happening in other areas. Look at your own area, your own surroundings, and identify what you can do to spark and create innovation. That leads to bigger opportunities, I believe.
Yeah, and I would double down on what Suzette said. And actually, it's partially the way we define innovation, I think, as Suzette most of us think innovation, large scale, whatever. But I actually think that innovation that means, creating new solutions for the problems that most impact you also needs to get a lot more credit and a lot more visibility. And so the question becomes, how do we provide more pathways to access to people to express those ideas that they have? Because innovation, absolutely, no one has the market on innovation, in my opinion. People have a market on accessing the ability to create ideas and profits from those innovation. But I do think that we totally have to change the mindset and shift the mindset around what we perceive as innovation and who gets credit for what types of innovations occur. Because my grandmother is highly innovative, trust me on that when I say that. So on the south side of Chicago, so trust me on that.
Thank you. Paul, do we have time for one more quick hitter for both of you?
Yeah, Pete, I think we've got time for one more, and this is from Colin Cody, and he's asking, what is a specific self-talk or practice that you use to overcome adversity and stay on mission? The one thing that is so important that if it was taken away, you might fail.
You know, for me, it would go back to some of those personal models that I live by. One of them, go big or go home. Number two, get shit done. That's what it boils down to for me.
Yeah, and I, agree. Again, it's those personal models, it's for me, it's really two that I absolutely live by. One is Maya Angelou's quote that a solitary fantasy can transform a million realities. And so I think, why not my fantasies, right? And because a lot of other people's fantasies have actually messed up a lot of people's lives, so why not why not put some good in the world? And then the other is by Bucky Fuller for me, that says that to change things, you don't fight the existing realities, you create new models that make the old models obsolete. And I just think that gives us permission to change any and everything that isn't working for us. And so to me, that permission allows me to just feel free to express what I believe needs to happen in the world, as clearly other folks that have created the problems we're dealing with today anyway. So I think it's about giving yourself permission to sort of do you.
That's awesome. Well, thank you both. I think the best way we can thank you and bid you adieu today is to tell you that all of us now are going to stay ready so we don't have to get ready. And we're going to leverage our unplanned learning opportunities. I mean, those are two great takeaways, I think, for all of the participants here. Dory and Suzette, thank you so much for being panelists and participating today.
Thanks, Pete.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we're going to transition to our next two panelists here, which we're excited about. And introduce right now Robert Passon. Robert is the CEO and Chief Wagon Officer of Radio Flyer, a business that was founded by his grandfather in 1917. Wow. He has led the company for many years and has won many Chicago Innovation Awards in that time since he's been leading the company. And also, I'd like to welcome another real innovator in the space, Alan Parker. He is the Chief Innovation Officer of Energy BBDO. He drives innovation and storytelling for some of the world's leading brands, including Unilever, Heineken, Microsoft, Burger King, and Ford. So Robert and Alan, thank you so much for joining us here today. I'm going to start out with the same question that I opened with Suzette and Dory, which is, can you share something you've recently experienced that's really moved or inspired you? Robert, why don't you take us away?
Sure. Yeah, this past weekend, my wife and I went to see the Obama portrait exhibit at the Art Institute. And right when we walked in, we saw a group of Black kids getting their picture taken in front of the portraits, and the symbolism and power of those kids looking at the portraits and seeing people that look like them staring back at them was really moving and really powerful.
Love that. Thank you. Alan, what about you?
As you can tell by my accent, I'm English, and like a lot of English folks at the weekend, I was watching the European soccer final, and we didn't do it, and all the sort of talk of like 50 years, could they do it, the pressure on them. But the moment for me was watching one of the England players post-match. He had promised a fan that if he got down to the stadium that he would give him his boots, the boots he wore in the game. And I saw a clip this week of him climbing into the stadium, up and finding this fan and handing him his boots. And I just thought, wow, in a moment that must have been heartbreaking for him, he found it within him to give back. And I just thought it was very inspiring to see that.
Yeah, class act. I saw that as well. Awesome. Well, thank you. We're going to, Robert, I want to direct the first question towards you. You know, for a business that's 104 years old, they're usually not attached to the moniker of innovators. You know, we mostly hear about innovative companies in Silicon Valley or 1871 or in River North here or the West Loop here in Chicago. But you're this 100-plus-year-old organization that's constantly reinventing itself and has gone through many different, you've gone through the Great Depression, you've gone through the financial crisis, you've gone through the pandemic, your company and your family has seen it all here. To what do you attribute your ability to innovate and reinvent yourself as an organization? And what is it about the culture and the values of Radio Flyer that allows for that to happen?
Yeah, I mean, really, it was born out of necessity because when I joined the company 29 years ago, we were really in serious trouble. Our sales have been declining for a long time. We were losing money. Our bank was threatening to call our loan. A few months after I started adding fuel to the fire, competitors came out with new plastic wagons, which started to kill our steel and wood wagons. I think my exact words at the time were, "Oh shit, plastic wagons." We had no new products in the pipeline. Our team and culture was dysfunctional. So it was really a crossroads moment for the company. And it was really clear why we had existed. So we had existed to make steel and wood wagons, but our core business was being threatened by these new plastic wagons. So it really wasn't clear why we should continue to exist. So I started asking a lot of questions like, what does Radio Flyer mean to people? What emotions does it evoke? And fortunately for us, some really strong themes emerged. And usually the first thing people do when they hear the words Radio Flyer is smile. And the second thing they do is tell a story. And there are always these stories about when their wagon was a race car or a rocket or a spaceship, and they were vehicles of the imagination. So we heard these recurring themes of playing outside in the sunshine, green grass, wind-blown hair, warm memories. So we started to articulate that the reason we exist, Radio Flyer exists, is to bring smiles and create warm memories that last a lifetime. That's what our brand means to people. So we went from this very functional view of ourselves that we make steel and wood wagons to we bring smiles and create warm memories. And that mindset shift is really what unlocked our potential and put us on the path to becoming an innovative company.
Love that. Thank you, Robert. And Alan, shifting over to you, you're at the tip of the spear for some big consumer products businesses. In fact, a good friend of mine, Stacy Tank, is now the Chief Transformation Officer of Heineken, one of your clients, and she was just hired a year ago to help transform the Heineken brands. And I feel like a lot of companies over the last year have gone through this transformation mindset. You're at the tip of the spear on that. You're focused on helping them transform their companies and their brands. If you could take us behind the scenes of that process. When is it the right time for a company to make these big changes? And what are some of the questions that you ask to help determine, what kind of reinvention is needed? Take us through the mind of an innovator who's reinventing major consumer brands that we're all familiar with.
Yeah, I guess that the first thing I would say is when there's a compelling business reason, right? But the worst thing I've seen happen is to try and innovate without actually thinking about what you want to try and do and why you're doing it. So it's interesting listening to Robert talk about like how he went in there and asked the questions and looked at what he was trying to do with the brand, where he wanted to take it. And I think if you think about it through that lens, like what is the compelling business reason, or thinking about it like what is necessitating this innovation, reinvention, or invention, and starting from there. Because once you have that, you have the North Star and the goal that you're trying to aim towards. And then you can start to weigh that up with, is it the right way to innovate for this brand? Like, is it true to the core of the brand? So again, I was super impressed listening to Robert just talk about how not only did he ask all the questions, looked at the brand. What was the right thing for the brand to do? Because you can talk about, hey, I want to take this brand all the way over here because there's a huge growth market. Well, is it believable? Is it compelling? Is it actually a proposition that consumers are going to listen to? So thinking about like, what is it we're trying to do? What's the compelling reason? Does it fit with the brand? Is it true to the core of the brand? And then we can start from there. And I think that it can be big, it can be small. And, I would like to say as well that I've seen some of the oldest companies in the world have been some of the most innovative companies in the world. And I think, whether we've done stuff in the past year where we've helped Starbucks ready to drink portfolio pivot hard into e-com and think about how they can get coffee to people that way. I've seen brands like Freshii, who's not a client of ours, but who went from healthy fast food on the go to healthy food prepped to your home. And you can see it's believable, right? The two things, the proposition from a consumer perspective makes a lot of sense. Or even pre-pandemic, Dunkin', shifting from Dunkin' Donuts to Dunkin', but staying true to the brand, which is, fueling America. It's not just Dunkin', it's basically the fuel you need to get through the day. So I think it's, as you're looking at it, it's compelling business reason, looking at the brand, and then building from there. And it can be a big change or it can be a small change, but equally both require the same discipline in order for them to have effect.
And Alan, just coming right back to you, I'm opening a restaurant right now, and my mandate to our team is, the lowest wage we're going to pay is $21 an hour, and servers are in fact going to start at $25 an hour, which is kind of unheard of in the restaurant space. And I'm getting some pushback and resistance. Now we're going to go forward because it aligns with a compelling business purpose. It aligns with a philosophy that I have about treating people with dignity and respect. But I'm definitely getting some resistance from the financial people and from some of my colleagues. So when you overhaul a brand and you have a brand and all the logo and all the other stuff associated with the brand that people have been accustomed to for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, you coming in from stage left and telling them, no, you got to overhaul this, you got to change this, there's bound to be some resistance to that. How do you overcome that? And how do you rally the troops to be able to say, build consensus around a brand overhaul or a brand transformation?
Yeah, so I want to pick up on two things. I'm curious to know the name of the restaurant you're opening.
It's called Poppy's, and Poppy Social. It's in Glencoe, the north side.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
So I live in Glencoe. I knew you were going to say that because I've been reading your social post. $21 an hour. You're hiring people, full benefits. I applaud you, sir.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you.
Well done.
Hope you come for a slice of pizza.
I will be coming for a slice of pizza and a beer. I guarantee it. The second part, I think you have to make it compelling, right? You have to say, right, you told us this is what you wanted to do. Here's the reason why you need to change and innovate, and show them the results that you're going to get from it, right? If we want to do this, if we want to drive this change forward in order to achieve these things, this is what it looks like. So I think you have to show them the tangible results that people are going to get from it. I think the other thing, and I've been on a couple of these panels now where I've pointed out the same thing, you cannot change by doing the same thing. If you want to change, you have to legitimately change. Nobody stops smoking by continuing to smoke. You change, right? So getting people to rally around the notion of change within the organization. What does that specifically mean we're going to do? So if we're looking at what Robert's done with Radio Flyer, we're going to push in to the adult market with bikes and scooters. And we're going to do it because it represents a growth area of X amount, right? This is what we're going to do and why we're going to do it. So it's not like we might look at it, we might try and do something and do a kids version over here. No, we're going to do this. All rally around the change and be specific with it and get everybody in on the specifics of what that looks like. Because a lot of time when I see it fail, people aren't specific what this change is going to be and what it's going to deliver.
Great point. Robert, most important question first is, are you going to come up for a slice of pizza as well?
Yes,
All
absolutely.
right. All right, good. But piggybacking off the question we asked Alan, you've been over your decades in charge of Radio Flyer. You've been bound to have met resistance when you were trying to institute change. How did you deal with that and get the team to rally around that change?
Yeah, well, I think it's a little easier when it's your family business. You do have a lot of authority, so I have to say that. But I think my experience has been in the most effective way to achieve change is to involve everyone as much as possible in the change. So I think, that takes more time. So when we were articulating our vision, mission, and values, for example, we involved everyone in the company. And we had these team meetings, these town hall meetings with everyone, and we would discuss those questions about what does Radio Flyer mean to people, and we'd scribe them on big Post-its and put them on the walls, and we went through that for a year. I mean, we took a long time with it because it was really changing our mindset, and we were practicing how to think differently. So I think that's a really key way. And the other thing is to connect the change you are trying to achieve with the external environment. So the changes with your customers, your vendors, culture, because if it's not connected with that, then you're not thriving, you're not growing, and there's no reason to change, really.
Right. And so bringing this back to you, Robert, with something tangible, you recently created a new line of products that I would say are a major shift for your organization. Most people have thought about Radio Flyer as an organization that curates products for children, but you've now designed and rolled out a suite of products for adults. Walk us through that change and how you navigated that change within your organization.
Yeah, I mean, it may seem like a leap if people haven't been close to our products or gone to buy something from us recently. It may seem like a huge change. Like, hey, I thought you guys were Little Red Wagons. Now you're making electric bikes. What's going on? So, but really, a few factors came together to cause us to want to come out with electric bikes and scooters. And first is most of our products are bought by parents to transport kids. So, wagons have really evolved. Tricycles really have evolved, where a wagon in often cases is a stroller first. And we have a line of tricycles that start out as strollers. So we're really selling and marketing to parents of young kids. Another thing that's really changed recently is that companies have been selling bikes directly to consumers over the past several years. That's a big shift. It used to be you had to buy a bike at a bike shop or at a big mass market retailer. And we've got a really strong direct-to-consumer website and a great customer service team. And then another way we've evolved is through our partnership with Tesla. So we do the Tesla electric cars for kids. And by working with their design team, we've learned a lot about lithium-ion battery technology and motors. And then the last thing was a few years ago, I rode an electric bike and I was like, this is awesome. We have to do it. Because I thought, years ago, I tried to get one of those cargo bikes for my kids and stuff, but it wasn't electric. And the thing was just a beast. And so then when I rode an electric bike, I was like, oh my gosh, this is really a viable alternative to a car for transporting kids and cargo. And that's what we do. So let's give it a shot.
That's awesome. And I love those mini Teslas. I've always wanted to pick one up. So now I know who makes it. Now I'm definitely gonna have to pick one up. Thank you for that explanation. We have a couple more minutes here before we segue to some audience questions, and I know we have some. So Alan, I want to ask you, Herb Kelleher, who's really my entrepreneurial role model for the founder of Southwest Airlines, he had a saying, think big, act big, get small. Think small, act small, get big. And what that meant is this: if all you do is think about the pie in the sky, your exit, your IPO, your $1 billion bogey, but you don't focus on changing the little things, the detail orientation, the way you treat your employees, the little things you do to delight customers and guests, your business will ultimately probably fail. And that's why Southwest Airlines was so good. They changed the little things and they did it well. And so not all reinvention or innovation has to be massive brand altering, tweaks, or going into an entirely different consumer set or vertical. So Alan, I guess my question for you is do you have examples working with your clients where you made some small changes, just some slight tweaks, not major overhauls to the brand or to the messaging, but then made a huge difference in the business, in the culture, and the success of the operations? And maybe you'd even say that sometimes the small changes, sometimes less is more.
Yeah, and I completely agree with that, right? Because internally right now we're taking a look at like certain operational elements within the agency, and I can tell you that all of that is the small stuff, right? It's not the big stuff, but by adding all the small stuff together, you enact big change. And I think you can see that on play with large brands that do it, and you can see it in play with smaller brands that do it. Like we've done stuff with Bayer in the past, right, where we've changed something in the background. Like, so we might switch out the targeting mechanism in the background. Consumer will never see it, but it proved to be between 30 to 50% more effective just by doing that, right? That one thing, we're just going to change this one thing in how we do it. Or looking at like, we're going to go and capture this TVC, a television commercial for a client, and start thinking about how you can integrate the entire thing together and connecting an experience so that one thing dominoes to another thing, to another thing, to another thing. Or little simple turns like we recently did something for one of our brands, Seeds of Change. We produced a whole bunch of gifts, free gifts for the day. And they ended up getting 5 million views, and it was like a 30-minute project. So I think you can see things like that. But to your point about bringing the brand in and changing the little thing, again, I'm going to show my Englishness, and I'm going to talk about a brand called Nando's, which it's over here, but it's not as big. But that brand is through everything, right the way down to the napkins. And if you look at the napkins, that sense of humor is right on there when I think it says, wipe that smile off your face, And it is about the power of the brand and pulling it into every single thing that you do. And it doesn't have to be big. It can be small. Equally, if you want it to be big, make it big. But using the power of that brand in as many different places as you can and have it pervade what you do and say is monumentally powerful.
Awesome. Thank you, Alan. And before we get to the Q&A, Robert, I'm going to ask you the same question. Have there been some small changes that you've instituted that have had dramatic corporate-wide change? And, you'd live to tell about it. We'd love to hear about it.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the most important thing in achieving innovation is the culture that you're able to build. And everybody talks about culture, and it seems like kind of maybe this massive amorphous thing, but really a culture is the accumulation of your people's daily habits, of how they work together and how they achieve things. And so we focus a lot on those daily habits, anywhere from how we set our goals. But I think having a culture of trust is really hard to achieve. And again, it seems like this amorphous thing, but one of the things that we don't allow really is zero tolerance for sarcasm. Because we really feel like sarcasm is veiled hostility, and it shuts down creativity and open debate and conversation. And so that's just one little example of a daily practice that the accumulation of those is huge. And there's that great Peter Drucker quote that I quote all the time to my team: culture eats strategy for breakfast. And we certainly saw that with the pandemic last year. I mean, the culture just kicked in, and we didn't miss a beat because we had built it up with all those habits for over time.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, I'm going to turn it back over to the command center in downtown Chicago for some Q&A for Alan and Robert.
All right, command center checking in. So the first question is from Laura, and she wants to know, what advice do you have for initiating collaborations with other companies to ignite reinvention?
I can
go.
Yeah, I can go. Set a common goal, right? We do a lot of this. So we might be working with a media partner like a Google, or a platform partner like a Google that has platform solutions, media solutions, and a client and a whole bunch of other agencies. If you set a common goal, this is what we're trying to achieve through this partnership, and these are the steps that we want to take, or rather, then you can map out the steps that you want to take to achieve that common goal. Again, a lot of it sort of fails because you're not necessarily setting common goals for the thing you're trying to achieve. If you can agree that and you can lock that thing in, everything else will flow from that.
Robert, anything on that? Should we go to the next one?
No, I think that's I have nothing to add. That's great.
All right, command center, back to you for some more Q&A.
All right, this one is from Michelle, and she's asking, how do you source innovative ideas? What is the starting point?
Yeah, one of the things that we say a lot here is that we don't listen to our customers. We watch them like a hawk. So we do listen to our customers, but it's more important to actually watch what they do. So in our case, that means spending lots of time observing families in their own environments, in their backyards, in their driveways, on the sidewalk, at the zoo, at the park, seeing how they interact with our products and just following their lead. So for example, we saw several years ago, people were taking our wagons and sort of jury rigging up canopies to shield their kids from the sun. We had never sold a wagon with sun protection before. So we prototyped them. Now those are our best sellers. We've got that from a customer. So those are often our best innovations, come directly from the customer, but usually not in a focus group where we're asking questions, more when we're in real world observing how people are doing what they really do.
That's a very tangible and great example of watching your customers morphing and building product accordingly. Alan, anything else to add on that one?
No, I think that's spot on observation. The only other thing I would sort of say there, and it kind of echoes back to one of the original Q&As talking about innovation being a sort of elitism, and where does innovation come from? Anywhere, right? Another word for innovation is hustle, right? Because that's often what you're doing. You're trying to figure out a way to get to something. So I think that, not being precious about who you're involving in the process, like getting it from anywhere that you can. I love the observation thing that Robert just talked about. And, some of the best companies in the world do that, because you can sit there inside your own company, your own agency, and think, hey, people want this. But unless you get out there and see it in action, you're just never going to know.
Absolutely.
All right,
Paul, what
Pete,
else we
I
got?
think this is a good one to end on. It's about directing innovation. So Reginald Laws wants to know, directing innovation is important, but how do you do it? How do you prioritize and pull it all together without the project going off course along the way?
The analogy we use here for innovation and growth is planting seeds. So we talk about that any new project, new product is planting a seed. And we don't know which seeds are going to grow. I mean, that's something I've learned after doing this for 3 decades and coming out with hundreds of new products. I have no idea which product is going to sell until it gets out into the real world in a real package at a real price in front of a real consumer. So if you don't really know, you got to try a lot of stuff. And so we try to not bet the farm on any one product, come out with tons of new products every year to see what's going to work. And that's the main way that we think about how do we innovate and keep growing and learning.
Yeah, I would just, I think, again, completely agree with Robert. Like, one of the things that this, having been in roles like this for quite a while, especially in agencies, when you are dealing with, different types of personalities, skill sets, and then partners on top, the one rule I've always set for myself when it comes to driving innovation and change is movement, forward motion. It doesn't matter what it looks like. You don't try and put some rigid 10-step process against it. Don't try and say, if this doesn't happen here, we won't do X. Keep this thing moving. If you hit a roadblock this way, we'll pivot right. What's there? Like, just forward movement. You will get somewhere. Be comfortable with the fact that you're not necessarily going to know that certain things will be done by a certain point. Have an end goal. This is where I want to get to, and keep it moving.
Awesome. Alan, Robert, thank you so much. We're ending. I'm turning it back over to Luke Tannen on time, and it looks like we're going to end on time, as we always promise our audience. Robert and Alan, thank you so much for your time and generosity and exposing your secrets for innovation and reinvention to our audience here. Luke, I'm going to turn it back over to you. Thank you so much.
Great. And Pete, thank you as well for doing a terrific job leading today's session. And Robert, Alan, Dory, and Suzette before you, you were all an outstanding panel. I thought you all touched on so many great topics that are part of reinvention, from the importance of curiosity, challenging yourself, trying new things while staying authentic to who you are or what your brand represents, as Alan helps companies do, to having an impact orientation mindset, staying ready like Suzette, so you don't need to get ready. And of course, the benefits of unplanned learning opportunities, which Dory, I thought that was a great reinvention of the word failure. So that when we each have our own version of Robert's "oh shit, plastic wagons" moment, we will be ready to capitalize on that change. And then finally, I want to thank our audience for tuning in and being a part of Chicago Innovation's 20th anniversary. We have so much planned for the second half of this year, including our big return to in-person events, finally. And I think, Pete, someday we'll need to do one at your Poppy's restaurant in Glencoe. But before we do that, we invite all of you to attend our in-gala on August 5th at Ignite Glass Studios, then our nominee celebration at the Park West on September 9th, and of course, the big 20th annual Chicago Innovation Awards on October 25th. And in between, we'll still have virtual events, so our audience can be engaged with us however they choose. And our next virtual event is called From Startup to Scale Up on July 27th, featuring great founders talking about their billion-dollar unicorn startups and more. And one last thing, the deadline to nominate for the Chicago Innovation Awards is on July 30th. So be sure to get those nominations in. Until we see you next, stay well, and we hope to see you or a reinvented version of you real soon.